to learn about language in the brain. So this is, you're looking at the brain here, and you can see this area right here called the planum temporale in purple. So if you laid the brain down on the table, you would see that the left hemisphere sticks out a little bit more. A lot of times brains are drawn as completely symmetrical, but in reality the left side on most people is larger in this area called the planum temporale. So let's see, some language areas that would be located right here. So this is where the planum temporale would be, and this is also where we find some language areas. So here we go. This is the Broca's area, and this is more for speech production. And then what we have is Wernicke's area is this red area right here, and this is for word recognition. So I'd like you to know that Broca's area is in the frontal lobe and Wernicke's area is in the temporal lobe, but I have this on other slides, so we're going to move forward, and I have a video that demonstrates all of this, so this is just a brief look right now. Okay, so the two main language areas that I want to teach you about are Broca's area, which is in the left frontal lobe. Broca's area is more for speech production. So what we're going to do is we're going to see the story of this guy. Well, it's not really a story. It's just got some background information about this guy named Ta or Tan. And I believe his story is in your textbook as well. So Ta, some textbooks will call it Ta and some will call it Tan. All he could say was Ta or Tan, and that's why they named him that. But any of you have had children, before your children can talk, you can tell, that they really understand a lot, and, you can tell that they're smart and they pick up everything, and, you can tell that there's not anything mentally wrong with them. They just can't talk. And so that's what everybody knew about this guy, Ta or Tan, is, everybody knew he understood everything. He was very intelligent, but he couldn't talk. And so when he died, Paul Broca examined his brain, and he found that there was a black area in the part of his brain in the left frontal lobe. And then subsequently, Paul Broca also examined other people with language difficulty, and he found damage in the same area, and that's where they got the term Broca's area. So what they believe is that Broca's area is for speech production. But also it's interesting to note that they think that pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, adjectives, and adverbs are processed there more. So we're going to find out, like, if you have damage here, you have difficulty with speech production, but also you have difficulty with understanding pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, adjectives, and adverbs, kind of the description words, kind of the grammatical words. And your textbook kind of goes into a little discussion about, the evolution of language, and talks about, how in the beginning we probably just had nouns and verbs, but then as time went on, our grammar became more complex, and so the Broca's area developed after that. So then Wernicke's area is in the temporal lobe. So I forgot to write that on that slide. So let me just make sure that you get that. So Wernicke's area is in the left temporal lobe, not the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe. And they believe that this one is more for speech comprehension. But you know what? This could probably help you. You could probably understand it as like the temporal lobe is near the ear, and so you would understand that the sounds come in the ear, and Wernicke's area, which is located right near the ear, would be for speech comprehension. And then we're going to find out that Broca's area is near the primary motor cortex, if you remember that from chapter 4, and so that would make sense that that's more for making the sounds. So Wernicke's area is also thought to be more involved in nouns and verbs. So if we find when we have damage, the person has a hard time understanding speech. Also, when you ask them to say a certain noun or verb, they seem to have a really hard time with it. I have examples. So we have a video, and the video's kind of old, but I looked through different ones online, and I still think that this one that I'm going to show you is really, really good example of what I've been talking about here. Also, after after that video, I have some examples of actual people with Broca's aphasia and Wernicke's aphasia. So let's talk about some aphasia and then we'll get on to the videos. So aphasia is a general language loss. So there's Broca's aphasia and Wernicke's aphasia. So if you have damage to Broca's area, see, you lose your speech production, and they have a hard time understanding pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, adverbs, adjectives. If you have Wernicke's aphasia, then they have difficulty comprehending speech, but they talk a lot. You'll see they talk a lot, but they don't seem to understand exactly what you're asking. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see a few videos to give you more of a visual, more multimedia presentation of what I just told you, and we'll show you some examples of the different aphasias.
While the whole brain normally participates in communication, most of what we think of as language depends on the left side of our brains. The area for language on the left side is more densely wired and even structured differently than the same area on the right. In 1861, Paul Broca discovered the left hemisphere's role in language. This brain changed the course of neuroscience. It belonged to a stroke patient nicknamed Ta. He was given that name because Ta was all he could say. After Ta died, Paul Broca examined his brain. Because Ta could not speak, Broca concluded the damaged part of the left hemisphere was responsible for language. It's now called Broca's area. Ta's brain was recently rediscovered in a Paris museum. Scientists x-rayed it with a CAT scan. The black area in the left hemisphere is where the damage occurred. We now know that Broca was largely right. Damage to Broca's area does disrupt language. Until his stroke, Charles Landry had a thriving legal practice. At age 45, a blood clot cut off circulation to part of his brain and put an end to his professional career. At the heart of practicing law is a facility for language. Landry's stroke affected both his ability to understand language and his ability to express himself.
Contingent remainder is sell it, sign it, deliver it, or anything subject to the contingency.
When we talk about language difficulties, we mean problems with either grammar or the choice of words. And if you were listening to him, someone might say, well, his grammar's all right, and even though he takes a long time to find the words, he tends to find them. His difficulties are really all mechanical ones. He's slow, he's got trouble getting going, but none of this is really language disturbance. Well, I think that problem gets resolved very quickly when we start to examine his understanding of language. Do you ever have any trouble with what I say?
No.
Understanding it?
No.
Well, suppose you wanted to communicate with a person who was in a distant city. What apparatus would you utilize?
Telephone.
Very good. All right. And I deliberately made that sort of a curious sentence just to show how well you did. All right. Now let me ask you, do dogs fly?
No.
No. And how about this? Do submarines usually fly?
No.
Mm-hmm. How about a Zeppelin? Can a Zeppelin fly?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't make the question complicated enough in terms of the fanciness of the vocabulary to throw him off. He immediately understood. And yet, when I produced a sentence that most of us would have thought was about as easy an English phrase as you could create, he failed totally. You know what a leopard is?
Yeah.
You know what a lion is?
Yes.
Right. So a leopard was killed by the lion. Which animal died?
I don't know.
That's hard, is it?
No. I don't know. What animal died? I don't know.
You don't know what animal died.
Right.
Obviously, that's got to be an error in understanding the grammar. Now, there's a very easy way to understand it, because if you think of those sentences with the grammatical words removed and try to figure out their meaning, you would have the same problem.
Landry hears all the sounds of the grammatical words, but in his brain, the sentence is processed something like this. He understands only nouns and verbs.
This pattern of having this special kind of understanding difficulty, which is confined almost exclusively to these little words, to the grammatical words and to the endings, is something that we find very frequently in the patient who's got damage to Broca's area. So the thing that's so perplexing in Mr. Landry is that he doesn't have this difficulty in spontaneous speech, he doesn't have this difficulty in repetition, but when we come to the comprehension tests, he has this difficulty in the most dramatic fashion.
Broca's discovery was important, but it wasn't long until other investigators discovered additional areas in the left hemisphere that contribute to language. In 1874, the German scientist Karl Wernicke identified a third language area in the left hemisphere. Broca's area in front plays a major role in speech production and grammar. The strip in the middle controls and coordinates movement, but Wernicke's area is involved both in the formation of what is said and in comprehension. When it's damaged, speech seems fluent but doesn't make sense. We now know how we process and repeat words. First, sound travels as nerve impulses to Wernicke's area, where it's analyzed, to Broca's area, where sounds are assembled into sequences, and finally to the motor cortex, which directs movement and sends signals to the speech muscles. Charles Landry's brain damage has produced difficulties that are fairly typical of patients with damage to Broca's area. From patients like him, we have learned a great deal about how the left hemisphere decodes, processes, and produces language.
Times I caught fish. Oh, boy.
And the stool, is it a boy? Is it landing down? The girl is laughing, and cookie jar window, curtains, and out the garden, and trees, low grass, and lady washing the dishes, and hot and cold water, plashing, running floor, and two cups of coffee or empty. Cupboard and cupboards, and is it washing, flashing, and roof too, roof.
I'm going to ask you some questions, and I just want you to answer yes or no. Okay? Yes or no. Is your name Smith?
Well, what are they? What they're eating about? I don't know. Why?
Is your name Brown?
Oh, Mr. Triangle, when listening and walking, they'll sing this, sing here for these.
Okay, just say yes or no. Okay, is your name Brown?
Well, it is here, then let me see, I just don't know. No, I'm not going to eat any if I know.
No. Are the lights on in this room?
No. I just don't find what you're doing when you're just sitting walking around here.
You're doing fine. That's okay. I know it's kind of hard for you, but you're doing fine.
I clean my own, I eat my own before and everything like that, and cleaning my bed before is always clean me, but I'm eating, and I can watch and everything in the morning.
I see.
Tell me the name of each of these.
This is a cigarette,
Okay. Go on.
a wand,
Okay.
a fruit, a root, a mud, cigarette box, a lined, a roti,
Okay.
molly,
Okay.
and a rock stream.
Now I'll say the name of each one, and then you say it after me. Okay? Toothbrush.
Factory,